Hi, at Digital Dental Surgery, we're focused on helping dentists of all types and specialties to leverage digital technology to help, whether it's surgery or in restorative dentistry. In this case, we have a new product called Nobel Temp Shell. It's an exciting new development technologically for a way that we can now temporize easily immediately placed implants. And it's become a real workhorse in our practice, and we wanted to share this with you because it's fairly new out there. So here we can see a picture of, this is a 6-unit case that we put in on 4 implants. And it was a great case that I wouldn't have been able to do anywhere near as easily using some of the old systems. So I think really what you see is, and this is the basic one that we would typically do. And what you see here is in the middle, you see the shell. That's the part that's going to be indexed to the implant itself, and the 2 adjacent wings. And what these wings do is help you index so you know 3-dimensionally you have the temp shell seated exactly where it needs to be, so that when you go to pick this up, you know you have it without any problems. And so really, it begs this question that we've all asked ourselves for a while, which is why not temporize every case if you could? And we wanted to back in the day, but it was too difficult. Too many problems. You're screwing that abutment on, you're unscrewing it. By the time you finished, you've torqued the implant. It's now loose. You're back to zero, or in fact, sort of worse. Okay? And because of all the hassles and all the steps in the workflow, in my practice, it just wasn't worth it. And so, how do we do something and make it easier? And Nobel really thought through this and gave us a product that's much, much easier to use. So why not temporize every case? We would love to. Like I said, what we can do then is if you do an immediate implant and you restore it immediately, you now can have perfect support for the gingiva, so you get less retraction of the gingiva, better healing, better aesthetic outcomes, and certainly equal evidence as far as integration of the implants. So we would love to do every case between either a custom healing abutment or, even better, would be a temporary abutment, because obviously when you've got a temporary, it saves you from having other problems such as, do I have to have an Essex, or do I need a flipper? And the Essex don't last very well, as everybody knows who's worked with one. The flippers put pressure on the tissue and they don't support the adjacent papillae. So all the current ones that we have right now are either very difficult to use or cause other problems unintentionally. So when this product came out, we were very excited to be able to use it. Now again, here's some of the other problems that we have. Of course, when you're placing an immediate implant, we know there's 3 outcomes that can happen, 2 of which are less than ideal, we'll just say. Sometimes you take out the tooth and you can't even place the implant. There's no buccal wall and you really don't feel comfortable grafting it, or there's some other issues, there was an active infection you didn't know about. So when you get the tooth out, you say, no way I'm going to be able to graft that immediately and place the implant, so you just know you're going to graft it and have it. Well, what's the problem? Now everything you've just paid for under the old way of having an immediate temporary is now useless. Not true with Nobel Temp Shell, and we'll go into that. See, so what else can happen? And sometimes you can place that implant, but you get maybe 20 Newton centimeters, 25 Newton centimeters of insertion torque. Certainly not enough to be able to restore it immediately. You really want to have 35 Newton centimeters of insertion torque or more. And so when you have a situation such as that, you know that I've got to do something else. I can't attach it directly to it. Again, without having to pay for multiple things from the lab to have your backup to your backup, the Nobel Temp Shell really meets all of those needs in one thing. And obviously, this is the sweet spot. Okay, you can place the implant. You've got enough immediate torque value for insertion, and you know this thing is stable enough to be restored immediately. This is where we'd like to be, but again, Nobel Temp Shell works for all 3, and nothing else we had used really works for all 3. So that kind of takes us to that next question. Well, what would be that ideal temporary? And we know what that is. We want something that's easy to place because we don't want to torque or damage or hurt the implant in any way that you've just placed, okay? So we want to have something easy to place and remove the temporary. We want it no screws until the end, because again, when you're screwing and unscrewing, you're putting rotational torque to the implant you just placed. We want to have easy and accurate indexing. And again, when you've digitally planned this, we can now bring things to an accuracy we never had in the old analog days. And last but not least, we don't have to create from nothing, because what we used to have to do was essentially put on a temporary abutment and sort of create this in composite or do a slam dunk, whatever. You had to do a lot of extra work. You want something that's pretty much there, and there's a minimal amount of effort to get it exactly where you need it. And that's, again, what the Nobel Temp Shell can do. So you've got to go through your basics first. There's some preparatory work, just like there is for anything. You're going to need a cone beam for sure, because when you're doing this design, it's a digital design where you're merging a prosthetic design into the cone beam to set yourself up for fully guided surgery. Okay? So again, and why do you need a cone beam? And here's a classic example. This isn't a case of mine. This was a case that was I have permission to use, where the dentist was going to restore with a root canal 21, and on 22 was going to extract the tooth and place an immediate implant based off only a PA, only a periapical X-ray. Patient had gone to another dentist. The dentist, who I know, took a cone beam to visualize everything in 3D, and really, and the results are kind of striking. You look at this and you look at how much of an undercut is there on the alveolar bone, and you don't even see any buccal wall on this cusp, but you know if you take that tooth out, there is no way in the world you're going to be able to place an immediate implant, or if you did try to do that, you have a good chance of breaking that person's jaw. Okay? So again, CBCT is an absolute necessity for these digitally planned cases. So again, after that, now you're going to either take whatever digital impressions that you have, as far as whether it's 3Shape, or in my case I have the brand new Prime Scan from CEREC. But you can even use stone models here and send that to the lab, and they'll do what's called a dual scan technique. Okay, you can either scan the models with your cone beam or just send the models to a number of labs. I work a lot with Bonadent Lab. There's sort of a regional lab, but they have you can send cases from anywhere in the country, obviously. And what they'll do is, for those that want to have a model, they can send a model in, and then I'll send the cone beam in. But typically I send an STL file from my CEREC, and I send the cone beam DICOM data. So you want to get some photos. And really, at the minimum, you want to get a good set of anterior photos that you would do for any cosmetic or aesthetic case. But you don't know for sure that you're going to want to get lips at rest. You want to get a sort of a full smile, and obviously this is not a case that we're using for a temp shell, but just to give you some representative, and you want a retracted smile so you can have an idea of the occlusion and where you're going from there. And again, it's not a case with a lot of other pathology, but again, these are sort of the minimum you want to have and have for sure documented in your chart. Okay? So, and you move on, and then you send all that stuff to the lab, and you get this back, but you've got to remember what some of the things are for an immediate. Okay, this is from a paper written by Fanato et al., and you know that you want to be in that either the palatal position so that the screw can come through the cingulum, and you know that's going to be perfectly screw retained. Out here gets a little tough. These they say acceptable. If you're through the incisal, I think that's acceptable, especially now. Nobel, Straumann, Astra, and a number of other brands have an angulated screw access channel so that you can correct this angle and have this come through, so you can still do this as screw retained. But here, as we see on the end, the wrong position, if you've got that head of that implant, the top of the implant against the alveolar, the buccal plate, that is going to resorb over time, and you're going to have a problem. Okay? So any of these first three, especially this one and that, would be fine. You want to be either alveolar, or you want to make sure that you're very much palatal, and that's sort of, you can't get through this without really spending a minute on correct surgical placement. So we're going to take a look at a clinical case here, just go over some planning details of how I look at this when I'm looking at it as a surgeon, and how we're looking at this from a restorative standpoint. All right. So again, looking at the panels of this cone beam, we see that the digital prosthetic data has been merged in. So we have this right here, and now we can truly line up You don't just necessarily go by where that tooth is. It could be altered due to a couple different reasons. The tooth itself could be malposed or it could have been damaged. So you can't always go just by that's where the tooth was. So we bring the scan in and we look. And what are we looking for here? We want to make sure on this upper left panel that we're on the palatal part of that. So we've got a nice gap between the implant and the buccal plate. All right, and so on this next here, we want to see that we have the appropriate depth, because we want to go past the end of that root, because the end of that implant needs to engage in native, really well-healed, solid apical bone, apical to the root of the implant, or of the tooth that we're replacing. And again, here's sort of the panoramic view, just shows you that. And then here we can see with the tooth in there, are we having this angle right through that center of that tooth? So that's kind of how we look at things from a planning standpoint. Now, when I look at my software, my Galileo's planning software, we're sort of looking at the same thing. I mean, this is a different case, but I'll show you how I look at it from mine. So what am I looking for, again, in my 5-panel look, when I love my software, this Galileo's implant planning software? So really, these bottom 3 panels are the ones we want, the axial, sagittal, and coronal views. So what we're seeing here is, again, I want to be on the palatal side of things, and I want to make sure that you can see some layer of buccal bone. That's so important, because if it's not there, you're going to have problems trying to build it up. And you may have to do this in 2 stages, graft first and come back. So again, in the cross section here, you can see there's my buccal bone, here's the tooth that I'm going to be removing, and you can kind of get a sense of the angle. So I know that, as you can see here, the center is coming right through, so I know this can be screw retained. Do I have an appropriate gap between the implant and this buccal plate? So we can either do a socket shield or we can certainly do a gap graft. Yes. So it's a mental checklist we're going through. And do I have this either at or just below the crest of the ridge, and certainly below on the palatal? We certainly do. And last but not least, again, as we spoke, do we have enough bone apically so I can sort of countersink and really anchor in good native well-heeled bone to really get that insertion torque that we need for immediate restoration? And the answer here is yes to all of those. Okay? And so we're looking at it here. We know from this dimension we're in the correct position, and we know from here we're right down the middle. So we've really satisfied all the criteria that we would want to say, is this an appropriate case to do from a planning standpoint? So again, that's just a closer up view, and you can see, like I said, all that checklist, we've got it through there. We know we've got almost 4 millimeters from the crown margin to the top, so we want minimum of 3. We'd really like closer to 4, and that's about where we are. So we have enough room to develop a beautiful emergence profile to support those papillae and also the buccal tissue. So again, this is the same case now, lab planned. You can see how they've brought everything in, and everything agrees. So when the lab sends me this screenshot, I know, because I've already pre-planned it myself, that we're right where I need to be. And we correct any sort of minor discrepancies, and we make sure our lengths are correct. So once I approve it, and this is how you would do it yourself, lab will send you this, you approve it, then they're going to make the temp shell and the guide that's going to get that implant exactly where it's placed. So here we have a case, just to go through some of the basics of a case. We got a lips at rest, picture, and of course, and the full smile. And again, we sent the STL file off my intraoral scanner and the cone beam. And as you can tell, here's a case where, sure, tooth number 9 was displaced. It's fractured. So we know we just can't use that as our indexing and freehand it. We really got to do this as a full digital plan case, because we'll have to correct for that problem. And so, like I said, we have lips at rest, we have a smile, so we know we're going to be okay. He's got a great lip line. I wish I had this on every patient. And we're going to look at and of course we pick a shade and send all that information to the lab. As you can tell, here's the tooth that we took out. It was fractured, so it came out in 2 pieces. No surprise, we knew that coming in, but the root came out atraumatically. I curetted the socket, obviously. I made sure we had good buccal bone, even though we could see that on the cone beam. I always double check. Here is, and the implant was placed fully guided, so we put, this is the snap temp. And again, here's part of the secret of really what works well with this system with Nobel, is that it's a snap. It just snaps in, snaps out, no screw. Screw goes in till the end, like we spoke before, and it's so important not to put any torquing on it. So we try that in, and then you try in the temp shell over it and make sure that it's fitting and indexing, which it is. So now we're going to put some composite in the shell, and again, index it, place it back up on there, and we light cure it. Because what that's going to do is it's going to pick up, again, it's not screwed in, it's just snapped in, it's going to pick up that temporary snap abutment. And as you can see here, you can see where we placed the composite. Great, you can also see the margin, and you know that obviously we're going to have to polish that up, add a little bit, and this is where we do a little bit of work sculpting, because we want that ideal support for the proximal tissues as well as the buccal and the palatal. And so we'll go ahead, we'll clean this up, polish it up, add any more that we need to close that margin. And then here we go. We have it tried in, looks beautiful, and again, this is immediate. Look at the papillae. They haven't sagged at all. They're in perfect supported position. As you can tell on the lower, we've done a bite check because these things cannot be in any type of occlusion. Okay. The other issue that you need, and you can tell from his lateral, from both of his laterals, this guy grinds. So here's a situation where we need to be 100% sure he's not hitting this both eccentric or any of the eccentric excursive positions. He was fine. And so the last thing you do obviously is screw it in. As you can see, we've cut the wings off, polished it up, Teflon tape in the access hole, okay, close it with composite, and we're done. Okay, everything was 3D indexed, everything was 3D set up, there's minimal adjustments needed, and you've got this, and the patient is thrilled. And you know you're going to hold this up well as far as the papillae. And there it is a week later. The tissue's beautiful. Again, the papillae have held up beautifully. Okay, no problem. Who doesn't want this as a temporary? No one. Everyone wants this. The GP wants it. The patient loves these. Okay, and I love it as a surgeon because I know that I'm going to get support. This is going to be a great looking case. And so, again, why wouldn't we want to temporize every case? We do if we have something that can be easy to work with and protects the implant and is easy and is accurate and indexes the way we want it to without any problems. So again, let's just go over the quick checklist. We need to get the temp shell kit from Nobel, the composite kit, whatever composite you like. We really would like something. We're using Admira from Voco, and we have the bonding that will bond. You can put on both the temp shell itself and also on the temporary snap abutment, and it'll bond to both of those. Temporary implant burr kit, that's something, so we put together a kit of burrs that work well for polishing, cutting off the wings, etc., and drilling the access hole, and that's available through digitaldentalsurgery.com. Obviously, like I said, you need your models, your CVCT, and your shade guide, and Teflon tape and occlusion paper. And that's really it. It's not a lot of stuff to have. All the stuff except for the implant burr kit and the temp shell kit from Nobel are things that you already have in the office. So we're not asking, you don't have to buy a whole lot of expensive equipment and things like that. So if you have any other questions, you can certainly email us at easthudsondocs@gmail.com, or so you can look at the website for digitaldentalsurgery.com and visit our YouTube channel, Digital Dental Surgery, and our Instagram, DD Surgery. Thank you.